So often, all our goals are usually the same, or usually different. You might want to go on vacation, right? Stay in Costa Rica. You might want to play golf. You might want to start a business. But the financial issues and challenges that we have are pretty much common for most of us, right? And those challenges that we have, one of them in life is longevity. Us just living longer in life, right? If you're a male and you're healthy, and when I mean healthy, I'm not talking about the guy who's running marathons every day, running marathons, or the guy who's just exercising, but a person who just have a normal, healthy life. As a male, you probably have a 50% chance of living to your 85 if you're 65 right now. And if you're a woman, and women deal with life better, you guys have a lot longer chance because you guys vent more, you relieve your stress better, you guys probably meditate more. You have a 50, if you're 65 now, you're going to live to your 88. And if you're a happy, healthy couple right now in society, you're going to probably live as a couple, one of you guys, till age 92 years old. Back in 1980, Hallmark only had one card for somebody who's 100. Now they have hundreds of different styles, one for 100, 101, 102, all different types of cards for people. The second challenge that we all have in life is taxes. How do we really look at taxes when we look at our lifestyle today and also down the road in the future? Right now it's tax time, so people would wonder, how can I reduce my taxes, my taxation today? And most CPAs, when they sit down, they want to tell you how to reduce your taxes right now. My job is to say, hey, let's project how much your income is going to be, look at historical averages on taxes, and let's also try to minimize them down the road as well. The other thing we have to look at is inflation. What's your purchasing power, right? When we look at inflation, we're not just looking at the regular CPI index when we look at life. Everybody has their own inflation, right? Yours is a little bit different than mine. I drive all the time, so my inflation is I'm always considering gas prices with mine. While my mother, she had a car she bought probably 3 years ago, and she might have 20,000 miles on it. Well, I bought a car in 2009, and I got over 200,000 miles on it, right? So we have to look at inflation. Also, we always have to look at market volatility, the ups and downs of the markets, right? A market is always going to be changing. That's what's the great thing and the beauty of markets and cycles. There's booms and there's busts all the time with it. And markets are very unpredictable. At one point, when we have markets, we can see clear skies, right? Everything can go great. People are making tons of money. And the next thing you know, we have a storm sometimes that approaches us. A perfect example of that, if we look at history, and I love history and money economics, is the tulip bust. And if you know about the tulip bust on the history, that's the first time it was a bubble that's in recorded history, where people were having tulips, and the money would double or triple in a matter of days and then months. Then all of a sudden, no one will buy tulips, and that was a bust. All of a sudden, it just crashed. And we see that where we think things are always going to be glamour and glory, but then there's downturns. But let's talk about the good things right now, and about the equity markets, and specifically the S&P 500. If you know if the S&P 500 is the top 500 companies, publicly owned companies, usually for the Standard & Poor, and they usually rotate, but it's usually the top 500. Since the crash in the market, which was in 2009, I remember that year. Who remembers 2009 when banks were closing, right? And unemployment rate was super high. Since then till now, the market, the S&P 500, based off of yesterday, has been up 208% now. That's a huge amount of growth, right? Huge amount of growth. But many pros are starting to become wary about the equity markets and stock markets for a couple different things. We have the issues with Greece right now. And if you know with the Greece debt right now, and see if they're going to pay their debt, which they probably will. You have Europe, which is having a slowdown, and even certain countries where they're even having deflation. In China right now, there's always a slowdown. So some pros might be thinking that we might be into the bull market, right? But we don't know. And I always say we don't know. We just know a bust is going to come, and there's always going to be a bubble. That's just how we run now, ever since as a society. And if we look at historically, this is what the market, the S&P 500 has done over the last 15 years. Where we had a great amount of growth right here. This is the start of 93. Then we had a huge amount of growth, which is the dot-com bubble. Remember, you guys? Remember that? We had Webvan, it was going shopping, and you saw the Super Bowl. We had all these ads for companies who was not producing anything, but were making tons of money when they went public. And then the market dropped in 2000 2002, where it went down 36%. Then we had the deregulation bubble, or let's talk about more of the housing bubble. And the reason I say the deregulation bubble, this is when housing, to get deregulated housing, you had a huge amount of mergers and acquisition where banks were merging with investment houses and everything else. And we had this huge amount of growth, right? You see people buying cars from their equity of their homes and buying all this real estate. And eventually, the whole market has dropped again. It went down to 38% for the S&P 500. And now what people are saying, you're hearing some experts thinking and predicting that it's a central bank bubble. And the reason why they say central bank bubble is we had quantitative easing, which is the Federal Reserve dumping money. Europe just supposed to be dumping another 1.3 or 1.8 trillion dollars into their economy. China's dumping their money. So people are worried that the central banks might be creating another bubble. And if so, is the market going to crash again from that bubble? That's just a question. And if so, how much longer it is, or how much more growth it is, or whatever's going to happen. So when we look at retirement, we have to predict bubbles and busts. And when we say when we talk about retirement, we're saying, hey, we're going to last and we're going to probably live for another 25 to 30 years. And we know as life is, not all days are rosy. There's going to be some bad days, and there's going to be some bad days in the market, right? If you're a person who grew up in the 80s, you've seen the 80s had a huge bubble in 87. You've seen the slowdown in the 90s. You've seen the dot-com bubble and so on and so forth. So let's look at this, right? And when we talk about age and retirement and dealing with bubbles and busts, let's see how it affects you and your retirement. So for instance, if you make you're David Mary, right? And you retire in 2000. Look at how the S&P 500 has done over the last 14 years. Most of it has been in a lot of green and a few bad, right? So if you look at David Mary when they retire, if they put $100,000 into that bank account, what do you think is the amount of money they probably still have? Do you think how much growth you probably have you've seen? Right? Huh? 150? Their balance is about $167,000 by the end of the year. Pretty good, $168,000. Now, when you retire, the problem is you have to start taking distributions from that money. And if that same $100,000 with the market going down, taking $4,000 out of every year off of $100,000 with 4% gain at the time and 3% inflation, guess how much is the ending balance now? If you start taking distributions, you're only going to have about $44,000 from that amount. Because every year you're taking $4,000 out, the markets and the market downwards, and you have to include inflation. And what we fail to realize, or what's happening now where everybody's talking about is fees. You hear your fees in your 401k plan, your mutual funds. And when we look at fees into everything, if fees kills a lot of that even further. If that person start paying the 1.5 quarterly fees on their 401k plan or their IRA, which most people do in your IRAs or 401k plans, even though you don't see the fees, that money now even drops down even further, down to $23,000 after it. And this is just in their first 15 years of retirement. And based off of life expectancy, they're probably going to live a lot longer than that. So 76% of their wealth got depleted in the first 15 years of retirement. So we have to plan for fees when we retire. We have to plan for bubbles and busts for it. And oftentimes, we have to look at how's that going to affect our retirement income. The problem is a lot of people is when we look at wealth and accumulation, if we get in the market the last day, on the worst day, or we retire the last day and not putting more money in, it can really kill us. It can really kill our retirement and we might have to go back to work. And we've seen some people like that after the market crashed, they just retired, where they had to go back to work. So the effects of losses, right? And when we look at losses, everybody say if I lose $10, I have to gain $10, right, on the markets. And that's not necessarily true. If the market drops, you have to gain even more. So I lose 50% on the market, right? I have to gain even more money back. So let's look at that. If the bubble dropped back in 2000 with the dot-com bubble at 30%, you have to work your way up all the way back up to 43% just to get back even. So when we look at our gains, how much more do we have to gain after our losses, and how can we recover from that? And what's the worst thing you do sometimes, though, with retirement, and even with the markets, is trying to be totally safe out of volatility and thinking that we're just going to go to regular banks to minimize our risk. We're losing the money through inflation, and we all understand inflation with the price of food and energy and housing, especially housing right now, where the prices have drastically went up. And you're in trouble right now for a lot of people if you're just renting in retirement because of that. Another challenge we have in retirement or just in life period is taxes. Everybody hates paying taxes. And when we need a certain amount of money, we don't think about the taxes of it. So when I usually talk to my clients and say, hey, I need about $50,000 in my pocket or $5 grand a month, I actually ask for pre-tax or after-tax, and most people give me what's that number is after-tax. They don't realize actually how much of that money is going to actually take for them to get that. So for instance, they say, hey, I need to make 50 grand a year. You look at taxes, which is 20% if they're in a 20% effective tax rate, right? And I look at effective, not tax brackets. A lot of people get that confused what the difference is. If it's 20%, you actually have to pull out of your income $62,500 to just to have $50,000 in your pocket. So you can never forget about Uncle Sam and how that affects us for our retirement. We always have to include that even when our accumulation, or there's our fees, even when it's real estate, right? There's transaction fees. You have all types of fees that goes on into it. What's the new fee that Oakland has for making money? Transfer fee in Oakland for real estate. All financial vehicles have some type of fees, and we have to include that. So what are a couple ways that you could diversify your fees in retirement is by putting money away in a couple different things. One is a Roth IRA. The only downside of Roth IRAs is there are income restrictions, which a lot of Californians do not qualify for, and there is amount that you can contribution limits. The second thing also you can do is Roth 401k plans. What the great thing is if your job offer it because it's so new, great, do it. I recommend it for everybody, but only if it's available to you. And the last thing you can do also is municipal bonds. The problem right now with a lot of municipal bonds is the low interest rates that they have because it's a low interest rate market. But it does give you tax-free income. There's one other thing that you could do also for retirement income that's tax-free, and that is using your life insurance, where you use a little bit of your death benefit premiums, how life insurance works. You pay for the death benefit, right, and it gives you a lump sum of money. And remember, when you give that to your heirs, all that money is going to be tax-free, based off of the tax code as well. And remember, with term insurance, are you here for, hey, what's going on, bud? Pretty good. Remember, with that money, it does, with life insurance, it does cover you, but also, if you have a permanent policy, it can build up cash value based off of the tax code. So you put the cash value into the money, right? You put money into the policy. You can lend that money based off the collateral of it, and that collateral, when you take out that money as a loan, does not be considered income. And since you're using the collateral based off the death benefit, you don't have to pay back that loan upon death, which is a great way, another income stream for you as well for your retirement. Okay? So you have your cash value, you have your death benefit, and you get this little bubble, which is your policy loan that you can take out, which is a mathematical equation. And that loan, when it comes income, it continues to grow the cash value. So you can even pull out more money down the road out of your cash value, and you're just using your death benefit. And we don't care about the death benefit. You're just using it strictly for the cash value growth of trying to say, hey, I'm trying to use some of this money income tax free. So let's do a little comparison just to explain to you guys how it might work compared to a little bit different than a Roth IRA. If you have a 40-year-old person, put $300 into it, $3,600 into a year, at 67 years old, getting the same rate of return as you would in a Roth IRA, let's say 6.5%, right? The first year a Roth IRA will beat out a life insurance, right? But the cash value is still being there. The life insurance will give you a higher death benefit. But say, imagine if you put that money for 20 years, right? At age 66. A Roth IRA will accumulate about $203,000. The life insurance will have $198,000 into it. But here's where the life insurance advantage is, or where the fees come down compared to the Roth IRA. Is if you start pulling out about $17,000 out of a Roth IRA and out of life insurance at the same time, at age 84, you'd be done with only $8,200 left after 20 years. While the life insurance would give you still have about another $600,000 in cash you can pull out of it. All because of his low fees inside of it and the cash value buildup of it, right? And using it as a loan collateral instead of just cash. So it might be a great, and it's really more designed for somebody younger, who's healthy, and got about 15 to 20 years for their retirement. And that's what we usually use the life insurance aspect for. So when we also look at retirement and your assets, what we do is when we look at retirement income, we figure out all weathers and storms for you. What's the bubbles? And what we're starting to do is now is doing a stress test. If the market does drop 30-35%, what we're doing for our clients is, can you afford the 30-35% for your retirement? If the market does drop, or when it does drop, I should say. So we follow a process that leads to a plan for that. So how we figure out the right balance between how we should do it, how much money should be invested in, and how to keep more things more safer, is we build a sensible retirement income approach where we figure out what's your total expenses. And when we figure out your expenses, we put it down. And we figure out what your needs are. Your needs might be, you might go to the movies a couple times a week. It might be going to a restaurant, whatever, during retirement. What are your basic necessity needs that you have? The second part that we look at is, what are your desires that you like to do? Maybe your desire is to go on vacation or buy an RV. That's a desire, but not a necessity for your life. And what we try to do is, we try to make sure that we can make your retirement predictable. And the way that we make it predictable is a couple different ways. And this is where Steve comes in. We look at a couple of things. One thing is your Social Security benefits. How much are you receiving Social Security? Second thing is, if you're getting a pension at work, let's look at how much is that pension from you going to work if you don't, right? So if you might be an AT&T employee, a CalPERS, if you're a police officer, a firefighter, a state or a local employee. But at the same time, where you guys come in, and why this me and Steve partner up is, what about your retirement from your rental property income, right? That is a reliable, stable income that we should be looking at, right? It's your rental income that can help take care of your needs and even some of your desires. And then after that, whatever other investment, you might be a little bit more volatile. Instead of looking at a property, even with your real estate property, instead of looking at your real estate where it's just strictly for income or positive cash flow, you might do something crazy and look at something that you're hoping, like a land deal or something else, that can build up more equity you're hoping, or you more of a gamble instead of a safer bet, I should say. So with that, what we're doing is we're making a total economic forecast to make sure that you have enough money that you can last 25 years in your retirement, if not further. And making sure you could do it where you at least know on the first how much money you can have. Because that's what we look for, right? Is to make sure that money comes on the first, to make sure our expenses are paid off. So we don't have to stress about it in our best years. Okay? And then if there is any income gaps, where can we find those income gaps? And how can we solve it? Is there a 401k plan you have? Is it finding another real estate transaction or deal that could help you fix that income gap that you do have, that your Social Security, your pension might not fix for you, or your rental income? And maybe doing some more creative ideas and strategies. And then what we also do is, with your expenses, we compare without adding up the inflation rate on all your regular expenses that you do have already, that you live your lifestyle off of. And we do this comprehensive study for you, put it off of inflation, making sure that you have enough income every single year of your life based on how much stuff might be safe or not. So we even include your house. If your house is going to be paid off in 15 years, we include that. If we know you're going to get on Medi-Cal, we can include what's your inflation rate for medicine and prescription pills. So we put a thorough detail for that to make sure that you have the lifestyle you need and the income protection that you need using safe assets, real estate, and all your asset pools put together to make the most ideal retirement plan for you, and make sure all your assets last your whole lifetime. So with this consultation, if you guys ever want any more questions, it's a free consultation. Thank you.